The new inflation numbers are out and prices are going up much faster than expected.
Inflation's proving to be stubborn.
This data is just, it's a really tough one.
It's hotter than expected.
So we need to ask the question, is the conflict in Israel going to make inflation even worse? Could this drive inflation up to what we saw over a year ago at 10% or possibly even higher? Could this take us into the next 1970s type of situation? I'm going to explain that to you in 3 simple, fast steps. Step number 1, let's go over what's happening right now with the elephant in the room, the price of oil. This is a chart going back to October 6th. On the left, we go from $82 up to $87. What I want to highlight most is what happened when the conflict in Israel started. You can see, as you would expect, oil prices shot higher, 4 or 5% almost immediately. They remained at that level, but I want you to notice here, we've got a lot of volatility. In fact, if we fast forward just a few days, we can see that the oil price dropped right back down to where it started, right around $83 a barrel. So what I want to point out here is this conflict in the Middle East is obviously evolving very, very quickly. And the price of oil can fluctuate massively depending on what's happening. We can see a lot of volatility. And I don't even want to mention it, but it is something that we have to think about. If there was a war that broke out, an even bigger war, let's say, where Saudi Arabia gets involved, the United States gets involved, we could see oil go straight to $150 a barrel. So the main takeaway here is we're living in a time where we could see some extreme volatility in the price of the commodity that is most important to the global economy. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's go over why oil can have such a dramatic impact on the prices of the stuff you buy at Target, Home Depot, Walmart, etc. So we've got a barrel of oil here, my artistic ability shining through right here on the whiteboard as always. So the price right here of that barrel of oil goes up. Now we have to remember that oil is an input for almost everything you buy. Not only does it go into making the products, but it also goes into the transportation of those products from A to B to retailer to where you can go in and buy them. So we have to realize that if the price of oil goes up, that's going to put massive upward pressure on the stuff that the average Joe buys every single day. And you guys watching this video would be the average Joe and Jane. To understand this dynamic even better, editor, let's cut right to the Wall Street Journal.
The supply and demand dynamics have contributed to the jump in oil prices. And for consumers, when oil becomes more expensive, so do other goods and services.
The biggest reason why gasoline prices went up is because of oil. And one of the biggest reasons why inflation was so high was because of gas prices.
The increases in oil could affect airfares.
If oil goes up and airlines are paying more for oil to power airplanes, they're going to raise prices on airfares.
Sky-high fuel costs also affect the prices of the food we grow in the ground.
We put a lot of ethanol into our car, and we need a lot of diesel to plant and harvest.
The same can be said for any other product that is moved by ship, train, or truck.
If you're a business and you need to spend more just to ship goods across the US, that's going to become more expensive. And oftentimes businesses will pass on those additional costs for that product onto the consumer.
So it's pretty straightforward. We can see with this chart I drew just very quickly here. If the price of oil in black goes up, most likely the price of stuff is going to go up, and the CPI, the headline CPI, is going to go up as well, which could prompt the Fed into taking actions that they otherwise wouldn't take. In other words, raising interest rates. And that could have a huge impact on something that's very important to everyone, and that's the price of real estate. And honestly, we're just scratching the surface. So the bottom line is the price of oil has a huge impact on not just the global economy, but the US economy as well. And obviously, it has a big impact on consumer price inflation. So much so that if oil goes back up to $150 a barrel, let's say, we could see consumer price inflation go right back to 10 plus double digits just like we saw in the 1970s. Step number 2. Before I answer the question, will the conflict in the Middle East lead to inflation getting much, much worse in the United States? We're going to do that in step number 3. I want to go over some statistics that I just found that are going to completely blow your mind. So make sure you're sitting down for this one. As we say on this channel, it's officially stiff drink time. Let's get right into this report from CBS News, which outlines the incomes in the United States for specific states, the household incomes. And the title of this article, as you can see, is Incomes Are Falling in nominal terms, not just adjusted for inflation, in 17 states. I mean, this is completely mind-blowing. I knew that incomes adjusted for inflation were going down. Therefore, the purchasing power was going down. But I thought nominally across the board, incomes were actually going up. But when you look at the household level, you can see that incomes in a lot of states are actually going down. And they have been going down for quite some time. We're going to go over a few charts here that are absolutely shocking. So we look at this map of the United States, and the red indicates where the incomes are declining. Now, the green is where they are increasing. So that's the good news. But when you dive into the details, you see that even where the household incomes are increasing, the purchasing power is still going down. Well, check this out. We can go right over to Alabama, and you can see how household incomes there increased by 2.4%. You say, George, that's great news. Right, but now adjust for inflation. We know that the most recent CPI number came out, and it's 3.7%. So in real terms, the purchasing power, even in Alabama, is going down. Even in a state like Florida, where everyone thinks it's just absolutely booming. Okay, well, household incomes there up by 1.7%. Just like Alabama, it's not keeping up with the rate of inflation. So think about how bad it is for these red states where the household incomes are actually declining in nominal terms. As they say in this report, not only has inflation chewed into their paycheck, but many people are also earning less, with census data showing that median household incomes dropped in 1/3 of the United States last year. Now let's go right over to the Federal Reserve's website, and we see household incomes actually adjusted for inflation. Now, this is nationwide. And going back to 2019, we were at 78,000 roughly. Now you fast forward to the most recent data we have, which is at the end of 2022, and we went from 78,000 all the way down to roughly $74,000. So what this means is the average household in the United States, their purchasing power has gone down by $4,000 since 2019. So it's not surprising when we see all these headlines in the mainstream financial media talking about how 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And what's even more astonishing, or maybe terrifying would be the right word, is that 45% of Americans earning $100,000 a year or more are also living paycheck to paycheck. Step number 3. Now let me go ahead and answer the question, will the conflict in the Middle East make inflation a lot worse, potentially something similar to what we saw in the 1970s? Well, I'd have to break that down actually into 2 answers. Short term, yes. Long term, no. Let me explain why. In step number 1, we discussed how higher oil prices can lead to higher overall prices. But in step number 2, we revealed how incomes in the United States, especially adjusted for inflation, are going down. Now, there's something else that I didn't mention in step number 2 that you need to be aware of. M2 money supply is actually going down as well. So the number of currency units that are out there chasing goods and services is potentially declining and may decline even further into the future. Now, for a moment, let's compare what we've seen lately with the 1970s, when an oil shock likely contributed to the inflation that we saw throughout the decade. All right, editor, go ahead and throw up a chart of real incomes in the 1970s. And we see that they did not decline like they have been over the past couple of years in the 2020s. They were actually flat. And if we look at M2 money supply growth, we see that lately it's actually been negative, something we have rarely seen in the United States. In fact, to see this phenomenon, you've got to go all the way back to the Great Depression in the 1930s, where if you juxtapose that to the 1970s, as you would expect, we saw M2 money supply go up and go way up. So let's go ahead and think this through. We've got everyone's favorite Moody the millennial. And like any good millennial, they demand that you use their preferred pronouns. And I don't know Moody's preferred pronouns, so we'll just go with their. So Moody is right here in the middle with their blue hair, and they have a job and a side hustle. Maybe Uber, who knows? Maybe it's DoorDash. I don't know. You'd have to ask your local millennial what their favorite side hustle is lately. But Moody is making $3, we'll call it per week, just to keep things super simple. And if oil is at $80, Moody's expenses are also $3. So they are pretty much living paycheck to paycheck. But I want you to notice, they are able to buy about that much stuff. We'll call it a square, about like this. Okay, now let's assume for a moment that oil goes up to $150 a barrel because of the conflict in the Middle East. Well, Moody still has their side hustle and their job, but keep in mind, Moody's real income or household income has been declining. So now instead of making $3, they are only making $1. But think about what has happened to the price of the stuff that they need to buy. Well, because oil has gone to $150, the price of the stuff they were buying went from $3 all the way up to $5. But now they're only making $1 because even in nominal terms in 17 states, that household income has declined. So because Moody's income has gone down, not just in real terms, but likely in nominal terms as well, they can afford to buy a lot less stuff. So if prices have gone up, but the overall population can afford to buy less of it, they're pretty much robbing Peter to pay Paul because they don't have the income to afford the price increases and buy the same amount of goods and services. Okay, well, let's take it one more step. So if there's less stuff being purchased, that's less stuff being sold by corporation or business, small mid-sized business, XYZ. In other words, in the entire economy. And if there's less stuff being sold, that means businesses need fewer employees. So that makes the unemployment rate go up, which means using Moody for a proxy for the overall economy means their income declines even further, and it takes you into this doom loop. So what's interesting is although oil can lead to higher prices, over the long run, it can lead to lower economic output, which can ironically be deflationary, not necessarily inflationary. That's why my base case, although there are no certainties, there are only probabilities, is that if oil went to $150 a barrel because of the conflict in the Middle East, we may see short-term prices increase, but long-term, that could be disinflationary, if not deflationary, and it likely would take us into a recession or make the recession that we'll likely have in 2024 even worse. Hi guys, I know right about now a lot of you are saying, okay, George, I get what you're talking about with these whiteboard videos. There's a lot of things to be worried about. We live in tumultuous times. There's a lot of volatility, not just in geopolitics, but also in the global economy, the stock market, the housing market, the bond market, etc. So as an average Joe or Jane, what do I do? How do I invest for these chaotic times? How do I invest in a world of complete uncertainty? Do I buy gold? Do I buy silver, Bitcoin, real estate, bonds, cash? Who knows? Well, fortunately, I've got a solution for you. I just did a live stream on my other channel, the Rebel Capitalist channel, my good friends Lynn Alden and Chris McIntosh. And we go over how you can not only survive, but hopefully even build wealth and thrive in these crazy times that we live in. I'd highly recommend checking it out. We'll put a link right about here. And hedge fund manager Chris McIntosh, macro analyst extraordinaire Lynn Alden, and yours truly. We'll see you in the next video.